Today we're going to be looking at an introduction to how to use the Unreal Engine editor. This is just going to be a brief and basic overview of some of the most introductory elements, such as painting around the map, selecting objects, creating new primitives, scaling, transforming, and actually playing your game. So you can see here I already have a project. We'll be using this for the demo, but if I was going to create a new one, I could go over here, and for this project you can go around and play with any of these if you'd like. Some of these have been used in film development. I think virtual production is associated with The Mandalorian, and then there's also some other modeling elements if you're more doing one of these activities. But for what we're doing today, we're going to go ahead and just create a first-person editor. And so in here we can leave all of these settings as is. You can use different quality presets if you're running this on a lower end build, and then we can select ray tracing, but in my experience this hasn't made a big difference for a lot of early on development. Maybe this will make a big difference for what you're doing, but if there isn't a lot of lighting and shading that's going in, Unreal's pre-baked engine actually does a pretty good job handling all of this. So now that this is open, you won't see this, but you should see a screen that looks kind of like this. So just to go through some of the controls really quickly, if I hold down the middle mouse button, which is the scroll wheel, and if I just click it, you can see that I can pan around my map while staying in one planar projection. So if I let go of that, I can also hold down the left click, and this allows me to rotate left and right. This is good for changing so I'm constraining in the y-axis while moving around in the x and z axis. And then finally, this is probably my preferred method for moving around in Unreal. If I hold down the right click, I'm able to rotate and move at the same time. So all I'm doing is holding down the right click, and then if I move my mouse, I'm able to rotate the camera in any axis, and then using W, A, S, and D, I'm able to move freely around the map. This might feel really intuitive to you if you've ever played any first-person shooter games, or just any first-person games for that matter. Alright, so let me just get to a comfortable spot where I can see my platform. We can also switch our view mode. So right now, by default, it'll be on perspective, but if we want to see any of the orthographic views, we have those available to us. So this switches it to top, and it automatically switches it over to wireframe, you can see right here. So this is picking your shading options, or your view mode, rather. You can also go to unlit, just to see some shapes. Lit, which actually generates some of these shadows. And then we can go into some of these more advanced ones. Probably the most useful one for our purposes is going to be this shader complexity. So this actually tells us how much the engine is having to work to determine any of these, or how much the shaders are having to put load on the engine in order to process the visuals for any of these. So if you have an object that has a high polygon count, or is just maybe too detailed for what's needed here, you can see that there's this scale, and so anything that's in green is going to be good, and we don't have anything like that here, but as we move worse and worse, we'll get closer into the red, and then pink, and eventually white areas. And you'll probably notice this because your editor might slow down as well, but if you're ever trying to see what's slowing it down, this is a good way to check it out. We can also do some greater detail levels. Some of these can take a while, like I think the pathfinding visualizer can take a while, but we can do some of these other ones which shouldn't take too long. So you see detail lighting, this strips all of the basic colors and just shows me some lighting information. We can see some of these other ones. I can't remember if reflections takes a while or not, but for the sake of this tutorial, we'll go ahead and stay out of that. Alright, so let's go just back to unlit, and in fact we're going to switch back to our perspective mode, and this is probably where we'll be doing about 99%. Some developers may prefer doing orthographic, but I think this is just what I find easier to use. Alright, so before we go any further, we're going to do what I think is the most important part of game development, which is playing our game. Alright, so I have to click on this screen to start activating it. You should get a hint that pops up to let you know that. And the pre-built game model that Unreal has set up for you is actually pretty nice. So you see we have some stuff like hand models coming out. We're able to run, jump. Yeah, the hand models was something that I think is even a little nicer. So if we could see our player body, it's not as bare bones as I think some other editors might have. And if you run over this, you can see that it even has projectile physics and allows you to kind of shoot some of these blocks. So all of this I'm getting for free as soon as I launch the editor. And there we go, no more boxes. All right, if I press escape, that pauses the editor and I'm back in edit mode. All right. So of course we're doing that with every change that we're making, or at least every big change that we're making, so that way we can ensure that we're incorporating everything back into the game. So next I'm going to talk about this outliner over here, as you might have seen my mouse scroll towards. So the outliner has every object and scene component that is represented on screen currently. So if anything is loaded up for this level, that will be over here on the right hand panel. Before I show you some of that, I just want to talk about the difference between the outliner and the content browser. So the content browser is a little different in that it has all of the items for the entire project. So this will have a lot more stuff than just your outliner, but your outliner might have duplicates of the same objects. So if you're familiar with kind of object orientation programming principles, you can think of this as the class of items, and these are the actual instances that are available on every screen. All right, and you can see some of these are more programmable components like directional lighting, a height fog, and then some of these other complex things that if you're just getting into this, I would probably leave alone at the very beginning. But with that being said, we can go ahead and try playing around with some of these cubes that already exist. So I'm not going to mess with the platforms that we use too much, but I might mess with some of these little rigid bodies that we have on scene. So you see that each of these actors, so there's a lot of these components that are actor types. So you have static mesh actors, and we can see that these are both actually static. The difference here is one of these is movable, so you might know this as rigid bodies, and then or character bodies if you're from Godot. And then we have static over here. So these I think are the same in other editors. This is just saying this isn't going to move when it gets bumped into, and this is. So if we wanted to create our own primitives, we can actually go up here and here we are, create shapes, and we're just going to, we have a lot of cubes in this map, so I'm going to add a little sphere. Did I go cube? I did. So I'm going to add a little sphere, actually. So here we have our sphere. The way that I'm dragging it right now, we have it constrained along, I'm calling this the z-axis. So we have it constrained along the z-axis, and we're able to move it along the x and y-axis. We can actually pull on each of these bars, similar to a lot of other 3D software, and we will constrain it in the other two axes. So this is really helpful if you're just trying to move it away from you, for example, and usually I'll move along these directions, X and Y, just at the same time. It's good to get this from multiple perspectives, because there we might think that it's in our screen, but actually this is far under our screen. Pull it back. And you can see that kind of goes to a different grayscale whenever it's not visible on the screen. Alright, so I'm just going to, I think we can leave that there. So now that we have our ball, there's a couple of things that we can immediately do with it. So up here at the top, we have Q, W, E, and R. You'll notice these are the first 4 buttons on the top line of your keyboard. And so this allows us to select, move, rotate, and scale. This is pretty standard for a lot of other 3D software as mentioned before, so I won't spend too much time on it. But you can see we can scale, and again we can constrain to different axes. We can scale it out of existence. Then we can rotate. Can't really see what's going on since this is a ball here, but I promise it's rotating. And this is what we already saw. We can move things around. We can translate. All right. I think it's actually a pretty good size and shape as is, so I'm going to leave that alone. And we'll go ahead and import another object. This is actually one that I created myself, so give me a second while I load that up. So there's actually two primary ways to import objects into Unreal. The first, and maybe easiest, is right-clicking and selecting Import to Game. And then we can go find whatever we're looking for and directly open it that way. My preferred method, though, is just finding the file, and we can actually finding the file, and we can actually drag and drop this directly into Unreal. And so it might take a couple of seconds. You can see this window appears kind of frozen. But once that's done, we are given this set of parameters that we can change. I'm going to go ahead and leave these all alone and just say import all. And I made a crucial mistake here in that I didn't create a new folder for this before I imported. So this is kind of why we always want to do this. You can see all of the mess that I just imported, probably some stuff that I won't even be using. And now this is all scattered across my layout. That's okay. We can just create our new folder now. Call this fire hydrant. And of course, we should probably clean up our objects and what we're exporting so that we don't get all of this, but we can still fix this. So if I select the first object, all the way down to the last object, then I can just click and drag this into that fire hydrant. And you see that little 47 at the top? That was telling us that we're moving 47 objects. And here we say, get this little confirmation that the move was successful. So if I open this up, we can add our object to the scene. And this comes with all of the materials that we gave it in our 3D export program. If I go ahead and run that scene again, now you'll see that our objects are successfully imported. This is just payback for all of the hours of UVW unwrapping that went on. All right, thank you. I hope you enjoyed. Status mesh